Hello, I'm Paul Larson. Lake Champlain, bordering the states of New York and Vermont, plays a chilling role in a writer's first book called Learning to Swim. Novelist Sara J. Henry has a background in freelance writing for magazines and sports editing for newspapers. In this author visit, she talks about taking the plunge into her first novel. Let's dive right into your first book. Would you please read us a few paragraphs?
Sure, I'd love to. Thought you'd never ask. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit, but this is the beginning. If I'd blinked, I would have missed it. But I didn't, and I saw something fall from the rear deck of the opposite ferry. It could have been a bundle of trash. It could have been a child-sized doll. Either was more likely than what I thought I saw, a small, wide-eyed human face in one tiny frozen moment as it plummeted toward the water. I was on the late afternoon ferry on Lake Champlain, the big one that takes an hour to reach Vermont. It was overcast and misty, one of those in-between Adirondack days just before summer commits itself. What I did next was a visceral reaction to those small eyes I thought I saw. Without conscious thought, I vaulted onto the railing I was leaning against, took a deep breath, and dived. It's amazing what you can do if you don't stop to think. I wasn't just cold, I was close to numb. I was alone in a very deep lake, 12 miles wide, diving after what could be a bag of garbage somebody didn't want to pay to haul to the dump. I was none too sure I had strength to get to shore, but I dived once more, and this time something led me straight to it. It wasn't a bundle of trash. It wasn't a doll. It was a small boy, arms entangled in what looked like a dark sweatshirt, straight dark hair floating airily above his head.
So plot-wise, what happens after this woman dives into the cold waters of Lake Champlain and finds this boy?
Well, she does rescue him. I can give that much away. She discovers he only speaks French, and for various reasons, she doesn't immediately take him to the authorities. And she ends up, the rest of the book is her tracking down where the boy came from and what happened to him. And he had been kidnapped. He'd been held captive for 5 months, and figuring out what happened to him.
What made you want to write a novel?
Oh, goodness. I always wanted to write fiction and novels. What took me so long to get started is, I think, the real question. It did just take a long time to get started, and I finally did, and I love it.
What inspired this book?
Insight into my strange brain. I was visiting the area after I'd moved away and driving along Lake Champlain there on the New York side, and it was a misty day, and for some reason just imagined this opening scene. I imagined a woman being on the ferry and seeing a child fall in and diving after him.
So you saw the lake.
Yeah.
In your mind, you saw a woman and you saw some sort of object fall into the water, and you just wondered what happened and what would happen after.
Yeah, and then when I sat down to write a novel, I wrote this opening chapter, and then I had to figure out who that woman was and who the boy was, and then it turned out the boy spoke only French, so I had to figure out what all that was about.
Well, one major theme of the book, starting with when the woman dives into the water to save this child, is the danger of allowing yourself to be vulnerable and the potential rewards of that. How does that relate to you?
Goodness, that's a heavy question. I guess you could say it relates to me writing the book. You know, daring to do a thing that I'd only really dreamed of, and writing it and working on it, and then daring to venture out into the world of publishing. And hey, my dream came true. I got an agent, I sold the book, and here I am.
So you went on a journey going through this writing process with this book that you've never attempted to do before. What kind of journey does the woman in the book go through?
It's an emotional journey for her. She gets very attached to the child immediately. I mean, she had no idea you could have that sort of visceral, immediate reaction to a child. And then it helps her realize she's kind of kept herself walled off emotionally from people, and it helps her, I think, learn to open up as the book progresses. She has to open up.
Well, you set the book around Lake Champlain, an area with which you're very familiar,
Yes.
and the main character is a freelance writer, and so were you at the time. To what extent are you drawing from your own life for this book?
I would say, as many first-time novelists and people who write in the first person, yeah, I basically drew a lot from, because I lived in this house in Lake Placid on Main Street across from Mr. Mike's Pizza, and I was freelancing after having been a sports editor, and I had a batch of roommates, and so yes, in those early chapters I did borrow a lot, but I guarantee I've never dived off a ferry.
You wrote this book in the first person, using I instead
Yes.
of she.
Yes.
Why did you want to do that?
I really think for me it was the only way to do it. It's the same reason I don't like to go to a big department store. I like small stores. I wanted I wanted it to be intimate, with a lot of internal dialogue, and it was much easier, I think, for me as a writer to encompass only the world that she could see.
Have you heard how the readers are relating to this character?
I have been astounded, honestly. I've got kids who are 13 reading this and people who are 81 reading it, and they find themselves, I had someone say they felt, even though the character lives a very different life than this person, that they felt they were the person as they were reading it. And that to me is just an incredible ultimate compliment. I'm very pleased.
Absolutely. How long ago did you start writing this book?
Ooh, my goodness. I finished the original version of this in 1999, I believe. That's the earliest versions. And as most first novels, it wasn't publishable. It was close, I mean, in some places, but it needed a lot of work, and I had no idea how to rewrite, so it kind of sat in that metaphorical computer drawer for a very long time.
You mentioned rewriting. What did you learn about the process of writing books during this?
Oh my goodness. Well, number one, think your plot out ahead of time and don't try to engineer it into the book backwards, because that's a lot of work. I have a somewhat involved plot. Two, to me, and I've heard other people say this, rewriting is writing. That's where I really learned to write. I think possibly because of my journalistic background, I had trouble once it was written changing what had happened. And once I made myself do that and made myself just dig in and move things around and rewrite and polish and polish and polish, and I'm like, wow, I can write.
So you started around 1999. It's taken more than 10 years.
Quit reminding me.
Was there a time during that time when you thought this book might not go anywhere?
Oh, I never thought it would go anywhere. I mean, I don't think, it's a strange dichotomy, because part of me knew I should be an author, because I knew that's what I was not meant to do, but it was a mess. I had no idea. I really had to get to the point where I said to myself, I'm going to fix this book whether or not it can get published. And I think that's how you learn to write books, is by fixing. You don't go on to write another bad one. You need to fix. I've seen a lot of people who've done that. They just write one bad manuscript after another and wonder why they're not getting anywhere. Yeah, it's work. Or everyone would be doing it, right?
So ultimately, how did the book come to be published?
Well, I went the typical route of looking for an agent, and ended up getting several offers and choosing my wonderful, wonderful agent fairly quickly. And he sent out the book to editors, and editors who were interested I talked to on the phone, and we selected the publishing house we wanted, and that's how it happened.
That's great.
Yeah.
There's a line in the first chapter that reads, "It's amazing what you can do if you don't stop to think." Now, how do you relate to that line?
That's why the original middle of my book was so bad, because if I had stopped to think as I was writing it the first time, I would have said, oh, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this. So I just pushed through, and which meant a lot of rewriting was involved. But yeah, you have to take risk. You have to, if you can't believe in yourself, you pretend you do, and just do it. Jump off the ferry, write the book.
That's great advice for people who want to write books. Do you have any other advice for aspiring authors?
Read a lot, write a lot, find someone to exchange work with. That helped me a lot with the initial draft. I was exchanging chapters with someone weekly. I wasn't going to show up without a chapter. Read your work aloud. It helps phenomenally. You may think you have a great chapter, read it aloud, and you go, oops.
What would you like readers to take away from this book?
I don't know that I want to say anything is possible, but take some risks. Believe in yourself. Reach out a little bit.
Author Visits is a production of Mountain Lake PBS. For more information about the authors and their books, head to our website at mountainlake.org.